Hey guys, it's Paradise, and we tried this new build after the massive nerfs in the recent patch, and we think this may be a secret busted build because look at this damage. If you liked the Bloodfiend's arm bleed build and are looking for something similar, you should definitely check out this rare weapon. Not many people will have picked this weapon up yet unless you got quite lucky, but it has a ton of bleed build-up on it, great scaling, and you can even slap on different elemental damage if you want to go holy or bleed, making this an exceptionally versatile weapon. So in today's video, we wanted to show you a build for it that will have you absolutely clapping bosses in no time. This is basically the new Bloodfiend's arm build, but this time we're using the bloodied fork. So drop a like below if you enjoy this video and comment below if you plan to try the build out because it is kind of nuts. After having put this build together, we actually think it performs better than the old Bloodfiend's arm build even before the patch in some scenarios, as well as maybe being one of the best new bleed builds in the game at the moment, as you can trigger back-to-back bleeds exceptionally quickly and you don't even need to stand around charging up a big heavy attack that may miss. So here's how it works. The DLC added in a new style of weapon under the Bloodied prefix. This includes weapons like the Bloodfiend's arm and Bloodfiend's sacred spear that you may already know, but also this Bloodfiend's fork. All of these are pretty good, and the Bloodfiend's arm was particularly good before the patch by doing that charged R2 attack that would cause you to do some massive damage and huge bleed buildup. This meant you could proc bleed in just 1 or 2 strikes of that charged attack. However, the Bloodfiend's arm has now been nerfed, so while it is still good, it doesn't quite perform on the level it did before. Essentially now you need 2 to 3 strikes instead of 1 to 2 to proc the bleed. But this is where the Bloodfiend's fork steps in. We've known about this weapon for a little while, but we were saving it for a good time. Just like the arm, this weapon benefits from having extremely high bleed buildup, which means when you spec into something like Arcane and Occult, you can really see the advantages. We've been able to achieve up to 107 bleed passively, as well as massive damage on the weapon itself due to its A scaling in Arcane, meaning you can focus solely on this one stat to get as much bleed buildup and damage as possible. Furthermore, the blood buildup for this weapon only has C scaling and other stats, so this is where Occult and the Bloodfiend's fork really shine. In actual gameplay, this means we're able to melt most of the bosses with ease. This is probably the strongest build that we personally have used aside from the Lightning Bottle or the Thorns build in the new DLC entirely. We've gone ahead and tested this, and as you can see, some bosses like Rolana get absolutely deleted. This is particularly powerful if you do end up using the Mimic summon as well, as your Mimic will also be proccing bleeds while you are attacking and proccing bleeds too. Another benefit that we've mentioned in passing is that the weapon is very versatile, allowing you to use multiple different affinities or infusions on it. As such, this weapon can actually work quite well with Faith on things like Sacred or Flame Art, and it even retains the bleed built into it, giving you access to a holy build with bleed, which is actually really strong in the DLC too. We've also seen people mention that this thing is insane when you take the poison affinity with the Flower Blooms Twice Ash of War. We haven't got around to testing this one ourselves because the bleed build we've made is just so insane, but do tell us below if you've tried this out. For the playstyle itself, we found this will work incredibly when you actually power stance them. This allows you to thrust at your enemies, building up the bleed status super quickly by using the L1 double combo attack. This can be used in conjunction with jumping attacks, which are also a fast-hitting 2-hit combo, so power stancing is the way to go. I usually like to open up a fight with a jump attack and then spam the L1 double thrust, and you want to do this whenever you have a damaging window between the boss's moves in the DLC. For a lot of the bosses, because they're so rapidly hitting, you will have to be cautious of their moveset and occasionally dodge roll. But to be honest, we don't commonly use spear weapons compared to the staffs, swords, or seals, so this is just what works best for us, being relatively new to this weapon type. But if you're a spear veteran in Souls games, share any knowledge that you have down below in terms of the best moves for status buildup. We would absolutely love to hear it because we're having a bunch of fun with this one. The build itself does take a little bit of setup. You need to ensure that you power stance the weapons correctly when using the Seppuku Ash of War. If you've already played the Rivers of Blood builds in the base game, you're probably going to be familiar with this method, but it does take a few steps, so let's talk you through it. First, you need to assign seppuku to both of your weapons Ash of War with the arcane or occult affinity. If you don't have the arcane affinity, that's because you probably don't have the whetstone, which are items you find in the base game, which allow you to apply specific affinities to weapons. You will need the black whetstone to apply this affinity. Now that you have seppuku and occult on both of your weapons, apply the seppuku and then go back to normal stance. This will then allow you to buff up both your weapons without losing the actual buffs themselves, so you want to do this before each battle. But don't worry, if you get it wrong, you can just do it again. Sometimes we mess it up, so I'm sure we can't be the only one. Just remember to keep an eye on the uptime of your buffs and alternate between attacks so you can build up bleed as quickly as possible. But now that you know how to use the build, let's go over the items and stats that you'll need to get this running so you can ruin those bosses. Firstly, we need to grab the weapon, so hopefully you have luck on your side and it shouldn't take too long. For this, you want to head to the Castle Front Site of Grace and just run south outside the Runeforge lava intake. The enemies around here will drop this weapon, but it is a rare drop, so you will need to farm this just outside where they're all fighting against the humans. What you want to do is look for the enemies that are holding the spear, as this is the enemy type that can drop them. To farm them, get the fast travel point inside the Ruined Forge, and make sure you have all of your discovery boosting items on, like your silver tenders or your silver pickled feet, as these are consumable items. They don't stack, but they boost your discovery, as well as the silver scarab talisman or other things that boost your arcane, as this boosts your discovery. It's surprising how many people don't use these items and then go out to farm for hours and not get the drop as a result. For us personally, it only takes a few tries to actually get the rare item. So if you're really struggling to get it drop, you can fully respec into arcane, as this will give you much more discovery. There are other areas to farm this as well, so if that previous spot didn't work for you, you can instead go to the Prospect Town near the starting Grey site. Here you will find a bunch of Bloodfiend enemies, or you can go to the River Mouth Cave, which also has a bunch of them. Now we are going to mostly focus on the arcane stat for this build, but you should still have some points spare for faith, meaning you can bring the Arcane Dragon Communion Seal, as well as the Golden Vow as a buff, and any other spells or incants you want to bring. But let's go over your talisman, armor, and flask. For this, we will bring everything that can buff our bleed, attack power, or successive attacks, as well as jumping and thrusting attacks, so we can get the most damage possible. For your talismans, you want the Lord of Blood's Exaltation. This will give you 20% attack power when there is bleeding nearby, and it lasts for 20 seconds. And because you're going to be proccing bleed all of the time, this is effectively always going to be up, so this is just a massive bonus and a great passive. Then we have the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia. What this does is give you an incrementally increasing attack power buff at 6, 8, and 13% as you keep continuously attacking. So as long as you can stick to the boss or enemy and rapidly hit with your double spears, you'll build this buff up and it will just overall improve your damage. Then we have Millicent's Prosthesis, and this will also give you an increasing attack power buff as you rapidly hit an enemy, but this time it's slightly less at 4, 6, and 11%, but this does stack with the previous talisman, so again, as long as you're rapidly hitting things, you're getting a massive damage buff. And then finally, we have the two-headed turtle talisman, as this greatly raises your stamina recovery, and this is probably the only bottleneck of the build. If you run out of stamina, you can't keep attacking, so this will help keep you topped up. And then for stats, I recommend going between 50 and 60 vigor. This is the preferred amount for players in the DLC, as the bosses do hit very hard. So if you're struggling, go to 60, or if you're not struggling, you could go down to 50 and reallocate those extra points elsewhere. For your mind, we recommend between 20 to 25. This gives you enough FP to play with when it comes to using things like your Ash of War, as well as any incants for the buffs. For your endurance, between 20 and 25 is kind of like a sweet spot, giving you enough weight to actually wear the armor set, but also enough stamina to keep attacking without struggling too much. For your strength, you need 14 as a requirement for the weapon, and for dex, you need 12 again as a requirement. Dump your int stat, as we won't be needing this, but do put your faith to 25 so that you can bring the Golden Vow buff, which is just fantastic. Then for your arcane, our main stat for this build, get it as high as possible. You don't really want to go any higher than 80, but if you can get to 80, this will be the soft cap and will enable you to do the most bleed buildup and damage with this weapon. Then for our armor, you want to use the White Mask. This again is a fantastic bleed item that is pretty much in every single bleed build. It gives you a nice attack power buff while you are near bleed, which will activate with seppuku or when you bleed a target, so this is a fantastic passive buff. Then for the rest of your armor, the Rakshas's armor set is great. It slightly increases the damage you take, but also slightly increases all of the damage you deal, so it's a bit of a trade-off, but overall looks really cool and means you deal more damage. And then we have your Wondrous Physics mix. For this one, we recommend going with the Green Burst Crystal tier for a temporary boost to your stamina recovery that allows you to spam your attacks just that little bit more, so you can ultimately burst down the boss very quickly. Then for your second slot, the Thorny Cracked tier is going to be a great option because we already have a lot of rapid attack buffs, and this will increase our attack again for consecutive attacks. So overall, once we start attacking, we will be dealing huge damage with multiple buffs popping. So that is everything you need to get the build going to destroy those bosses. So we hope you have some fun with this and do tell us how you get on with it. But one last thing, if you want to deal even more damage with this build, then we actually suggest that you go and grab these Erdtree fragments, as they will increase your damage output dramatically. So if you don't have all of those Skadu or Shadow Tree fragments, we actually do have a guide on the channel that you can check out to grab all of them. Drop a like and comment below to let us know if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe for more Elden Ring coming your way very, very soon.